ma'am.
Afternoon. Look, I wasn't speeding. I had the cruise set at 30. I know this block like the back of my hand. The light turned yellow while I was already in the intersection. You can check the cameras if you need to. What else do you need?
Saturday afternoon. 2-17 pride. M. The kind of Minnesota summer that turns parked cars into ovens and makes the blacktop shimmer like water under a merciless sun. Heat hung in the air. Thick and unmoving. The kind that makes even short errands feel heavy. Sarah Benson eased her SUV into the drive-through line, planning nothing more than a quick stop before dropping her son at basketball practice. She was off duty. Civilian clothes. A gray hoodie. Faded jeans. No badge. No uniform. Just a mother with her 10-year-old son in the passenger seat. Elijah's Timberwolves cap sat on the dashboard, turned slightly toward the windshield. He was talking excitedly about a crossover move he'd been practicing all week, hands gesturing as if he were already on the court. Sarah smiled, half listening, half watching the menu board as she placed their order. And then everything changed. From the corner of her rearview mirror, she noticed movement. 3 figures stepping out of an unmarked white van she hadn't seen idling near the exit. No lights. No sirens. Just doors sliding open and men emerging with purpose. Their body cameras were already on. The kind of detail you don't notice unless you've worn a badge yourself. They moved fast, coordinated, spreading out the way officers do when they've already decided how this interaction will end. Immigration and customs enforcement patches caught the sunlight on their tactical vests. Sarah's smile faded. 15 years on the force had trained her to read body language faster than words. The spacing, the hands hovering near their belts, the deliberate calm of men who weren't here to ask questions. They were here for her. Elijah trailed off mid-sentence. "Mom." Sarah didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the mirror as the agents closed in, their reflections growing larger with every step. This was supposed to be a routine drive-through stop. Instead, it was about to become one of the most expensive fast food runs in Minnesota history. And what those agents didn't know yet, what they never bothered to ask, was that they had just chosen the wrong woman. Agent Derek Carlson led the approach. He moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Chin slightly raised. Eyes already narrowed as he closed the distance to Sarah's driver's side window. His partner split off without a word. One to the passenger side. One drifting toward the rear of the SUV. Textbook containment. Sarah clocked it instantly. 15 years wearing a badge had trained her to recognize when an encounter was about to turn into a stop. And when a stop was about to turn into something else entirely, Elijah leaned forward in his seat. Curiosity, replacing excitement. "Are they cops?" he whispered. "Just stay quiet." "Baby," Sarah said softly, keeping her hands resting on the steering wheel where everyone could see them. Carlson stopped just short of the window. His ice patch was clean, new-looking, the Velcro sharp against the dark vest. His body camera lens blinked red. "Afternoon," he said, his voice flat. "Rehearsed. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're conducting a compliance check in this area." Compliance check. The phrase landed heavy, like something practiced in briefings but never questioned in real life. "I'm going to need to see identification," Carlson continued, eyes scanning the inside of the vehicle, "and documentation proving legal status." He didn't ask if she lived nearby, didn't explain why she'd been selected, didn't mention any report, tip, or description, just a demand. Sarah felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not fear, but recognition, the sound of authority detached from accountability, the kind she'd disciplined officers for in her own department. She met Carlson's eyes, calm and steady. "I'm a police officer," she said. "Minnesota PD." Lieutenant Sarah Benson. My badge and department ID are in my glove compartment. For a half second, she thought it might end there. It didn't. Carlson's expression didn't change. No surprise. No hesitation. Not even curiosity. Everyone says that. He replied, "Do you have documentation on you right now, proving citizenship?" The words were cold, final, as if the answer had already been decided. Sarah understood in that moment that her badge off duty, out of sight, meant nothing to him. All he saw was a black woman in a hoodie, sitting in an SUV, in a place he believed gave him power. And behind her, Elijah watched his mother closely, sensing something was wrong, even if he didn't yet understand what it was. Sarah didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Training kicked in before emotion ever could. "My driver's license is in my wallet," she said evenly. "My badge and department ID are in the glove compartment. If you call my precinct, they can verify everything immediately." She spoke the way she'd spoken to nervous civilians for years. Clear, calm, non-threatening. Carlson didn't move. Behind him, Agent Reeves had shifted closer to the passenger side window. He leaned in slightly, eyes flicking to Elijah, then back to Sarah, as if weighing something that had nothing to do with the law. "We'll verify once we establish identity and status," Carlson replied. His tone sharpened. "Right now, I need to see proof." The emphasis on proof was deliberate. Sarah felt it then, that familiar burn behind the ribs. Not anger yet. Something colder. The understanding that this wasn't about procedure. It was about disbelief. "I'm offering verification," she said. "You're refusing it." Carlson's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, don't complicate this." Complicate this. The words echoed. Because what he was asking her to do, prove her right to exist in her own neighborhood, was already the complication. Elijah shifted in his seat, fingers curling around his phone. His eyes moved from Carlson's face to his mother's hands, still planted carefully on the wheel. "Mom," he whispered. "Are we in trouble?" Sarah didn't look away from Carlson. "No, baby," she said softly. "We're okay." But she knew that wasn't true. Reeves took another step closer to the window, close enough that Elijah leaned back against the seat. His excitement from minutes ago completely gone. Trans boots scraped behind the SUV. Metal on pavement. A quiet sound, but final, like a door closing. They were boxing her in. Sarah's instincts screamed that this was sliding fast, faster than it ever should have. She had complied. She had identified herself. She had offered verification. And still, the demand remained. Carlson leaned in slightly, his shadow cutting across the window. "Do not reach for anything," he said. "Step out of the vehicle." The command landed heavy in the air. Around them, the drive-through continued, engines idling, a child laughing somewhere behind them, the smell of hot oil and fries drifting through the open window. Ordinary life moving forward, unaware that a line had just been crossed and that there would be no way to uncross it. For a brief moment, Sarah considered how quickly this had escalated. No explanation. No suspicion articulated. Just authority tightening its grip because it could. "I'm retrieving my ID," she said carefully. "You asked for documentation. It's in my wallet." She moved slowly, deliberately, every inch of motion designed to be unthreatening. Carlson's hand snapped toward his belt. "Stop," he barked. "I said don't reach for anything." The command cut through the air, sharp enough to draw attention from nearby cars. Reeves shifted closer to the passenger door now, his presence filling the space beside Elijah. The boy froze. his hands dropping to his lap. Eyes wide, Tran moved behind the SUV, positioning himself squarely at the rear, blocking the exit completely. The unmarked van idled just feet away, its engine humming low and steady. They had turned a drive-through into a containment zone. Sarah took a slow breath, feeling her pulse hammer in her ears. This was the moment officers were trained for, the moment when misunderstandings either de-escalated or spiraled. "Officer," she said, using the word intentionally. "I am complying. My hands are visible. My ID is in the center console." Carlson didn't respond. He stared at her hands like they were a threat. A horn blared somewhere behind them. A woman in a minivan leaned out her window, trying to see what was happening. 2 cars back, a teenager lifted his phone, holding it just high enough to record. Sarah noticed all of it. So did Carlson. "Step out of the vehicle," he repeated. Slower this time. Louder. Final. The way officers speak when they want witnesses to hear who they think is in control. Sarah knew the danger of refusing. She also knew the danger of compliance in the wrong hands. She opened the driver's side door slowly, letting it swing wide. Hot air rushed in. She placed both feet on the pavement and raised her hands where every camera could see them. "I am complying," she said clearly. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Benson, Minnesota Police Department. I am unarmed. My son is in the vehicle." Her voice carried farther than she intended. Far enough for the phones now recording. Far enough for the Burger Barn employee watching from the window. Far enough to make sure the record would be clear when this was played back later. Because deep down, Sarah already understood something the agents didn't. This wasn't just an encounter anymore. It was evidence. The moment Sarah's foot touched the pavement, everything happened at once. Carlson reached out and grabbed her wrist. Hard. The sudden force twisted her arm behind her back before she could finish turning around. Pain shot up her shoulder as her balance broke. "Hey!" The metal cuffs snapped shut with a sound that cut through the drive-through noise like a gunshot. Cold. Heavy. Final. "Mom." Elijah's voice cracked, sharp with fear. His small hands slapped against the window as he leaned forward, panic flooding his face. "It's okay, baby," Sarah said instantly, forcing calm into her voice even as her heart slammed against her ribs. "Stay in the car. Don't move." Reeves closed in from the other side, gripping her arm as if she might suddenly become dangerous. Tran stepped closer to the passenger door, his body blocking Elijah's view. Sarah stood still. She didn't resist. She didn't struggle. "This is an unlawful seizure," she said clearly, loud enough for every body camera and every phone now pointed at her. "I am not resisting. I have identified myself. There is no reasonable suspicion for this detention." Carlson ignored her, already guiding her forward. "I'm a Minnesota police lieutenant," Sarah continued. "I'm a United States citizen. I was born in Houston, Texas. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." A woman 2 cars back shouted something Sarah couldn't make out the words. A car horn blared. A paper bag tipped over near the window. Fries spilling onto the pavement. Forgotten. Ordinary life collapsing into chaos. As Carlson marched her toward the van, Sarah turned her head, searching desperately for her son through the tinted glass. "Elijah, listen to me," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Someone's going to call Aunt Vanessa. Her number's in my phone. The password is your birthday. Stay calm." Tears streamed down Elijah's face as he nodded, trying to be brave in a moment no child should ever have to face. The van door slid open behind her, and as they pushed Sarah inside, cutting off the sunlight, the voices, and her last clear view of her son. Something irreversible happened. This was no longer a mistake. It was a civil rights violation unfolding in public, on camera, with witnesses, and the system had just crossed a line it could never uncross. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the van's interior, the outside noise dropping to a muffled hum as the engine pulled away. The air inside was stale, old coffee. Sweat. Vinyl heated by the sun. Sarah was forced down onto a narrow bench, her wrists still cuffed behind her back. Metal biting into skin with every bump in the road. The van rumbled through Minneapolis streets she knew by heart. Streets she'd patrolled. Neighborhoods she'd sworn to protect. Now she was seeing them through tinted glass, from the wrong side of authority. She closed her eyes and did what she'd been trained to do her entire career. She assessed. No probable cause articulated. No reasonable suspicion established. Refusal to verify offered credentials. Excessive force during a compliant stop. Public detention in front of a minor. Prolonged seizure without explanation. Each violation stacked neatly in her mind. Not as outrage, but as evidence. Her heart was still racing. But her thoughts were sharp. Focused. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. She thought of Elijah. Alone in the SUV. Surrounded by strangers with phones. Waiting for someone to tell him his mother was coming back. The image cut deep, but she pushed it down. She couldn't afford to break now. The van hit a pothole. Pain flared through her shoulders. Sarah clenched her jaw and breathed through it. This wasn't the first time she'd felt powerless in uniform, but it was the first time it had happened with federal agents. The first time it had happened without a badge to protect her. The first time it had happened in front of her child, and somewhere between one red light and the next. Sarah realized something with chilling clarity. They thought they'd arrested a problem. What they'd actually done was activate a case. A case built by someone who understood the law from both sides of the badge. Someone who knew exactly how expensive this ride was about to become. The van turned sharply, slowing as it approached its destination. Sarah opened her eyes. Whatever waited on the other side of those doors. She was ready, because this wasn't the end of her story. It was the moment the system made its first fatal mistake. As the van rolled on, Sarah's mind drifted not backward into fear, but inward, to something she'd kept hidden for years, long before this afternoon, long before the cuffs, long before ICE ever learned her name. She thought about night classes taken after 12-hour shifts, about lecture halls that smelled like old paper and ambition, about constitutional law exams studied for while her son slept in the next room, his backpack already laid out for the morning. Sarah Benson wasn't just a police lieutenant. She was a law school graduate. She'd earned her JD quietly, deliberately, from the University of Texas. Passed the bar on her first attempt. And then she'd locked that credential away like a contingency plan she hoped she'd never need. In law enforcement, especially as a black woman, being too educated could be dangerous. Ambition could be mistaken for arrogance. Knowledge could make you a target. So she stayed quiet, let people underestimate her. But sitting in the back of that van, wrists burning, heart steady, Sarah felt something unexpected rise beneath the fear. Clarity. She knew exactly what they were doing wrong. She knew which Supreme Court cases they were violating. She knew the difference between authority and legality. And most importantly, she knew how to prove it. This wasn't just misconduct. It was clearly established constitutional law, the kind that stripped officers of qualified immunity, the kind juries didn't forgive, the kind that ended careers. Sarah adjusted her shoulders as best she could against the cuffs, forcing her breathing to slow. Every second mattered now. Every word spoken. Every angle of every camera. Because when this was over, and it would be over, she wasn't going to rely on outrage or sympathy. She was going to rely on evidence. The van slowed, then turned sharply. The hum of the engine dropped as it rolled through a gated entrance. Sarah felt the shift before she saw it. She was no longer being transported. She was being processed. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the heat, the pain, and the injustice, Sarah Benson made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't just going to get out. She was going to make sure this never happened to anyone else again. The van came to a stop. The door slid open, and harsh afternoon light flooded the space, forcing Sarah to squint as hands guided her down onto concrete. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee sterile. Impersonal. Designed to strip dignity before words were ever spoken. This was an ice holding facility. Inside, everything echoed. Boots on tile. Radios crackling. Phones ringing somewhere out of sight. Agents moved past her without looking. Eyes fixed on clipboards and screens. To them, she wasn't a person. She was a process. They led her down a narrow corridor and into holding cell 6. Concrete walls. Institutional beige paint. A metal bench bolted to the floor. Fluorescent lights overhead humming at a pitch that settled deep into her skull. The door clanged shut behind her with a finality that landed heavier than the cuffs ever had. Sarah sat carefully, wrists still bound behind her back, and let the cold seep through her clothes. Time stretched. Minutes blurred into something shapeless. She counted her breaths, catalogued details, ran through detention protocols she'd once taught from the other side of the bars. Still no Miranda. Still no probable cause. Still no justification. Nearly an hour passed before the door opened again. Agent Carlson stepped in with a clipboard, followed by a woman Sarah hadn't seen before. Her nameplate read, Voss. "State your full name," Carlson said, not looking up. "Lieutenant Sarah Benson." She replied, "Minnesota Police Department. Badge 3462. Carlson paused, pen hovering. Place of birth: Houston, Texas. "And your parents' names?" Sarah met his eyes calmly. "This detention is unlawful. You have no legal basis to hold me. I've identified myself repeatedly. Every minute I remain here increases your liability." For the first time since the drive-through, something flickered across a federal agent's face. Uncertainty. Voss looked up from the clipboard, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were finally seeing Sarah not as a file, but as a problem. Carlson cleared his throat. "We're following standard procedure. Once we verify, you could have verified at the scene." Sarah cut in. "Instead, you handcuffed me in front of my child and transported me without cause, all of which is recorded by your own body cameras." Silence filled the room. Voss closed the folder slowly, without another word. She turned and left. Carlson followed, the door slamming shut behind them. Sarah exhaled for the first time since she'd been detained. The cracks were showing. And the system, for the first time that day, knew it had a problem. The cell went quiet again. Sarah sat alone on the cold bench, wrists still aching where the cuffs had dug in. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied, humming like nothing had happened. Outside the narrow window near the ceiling, the color of the sky shifted almost imperceptibly as the afternoon slipped toward evening. Time moved differently in confinement. She counted footsteps in the hallway, listened to muffled conversations through the concrete walls. Somewhere down the corridor, A phone rang again and again before finally being answered. 2 hours passed. Then 3. No explanation. No update. Just silence. Sarah ran the encounter through her mind again. Not as a victim replaying trauma, but as an attorney building a timeline. The refusal to verify. The unlawful seizure. The prolonged detention. Each minute without justification only deepened the violation. Finally, nearly 4 hours after she'd been taken from the drive-thru, the door opened. Agent Voss stepped inside alone. "We've confirmed your identity with Minnesota PD," she said carefully. "You're clear to be released." Clear. As if Sarah had ever been anything else. Sarah stood slowly, her legs stiff from sitting. She rolled her shoulders once, feeling the pull of tight muscles, then met Voss's eyes. "I need the body camera footage from all agents involved," she said. "I need the incident reports. And I need the names and badge numbers of everyone who participated in my detention." Voss hesitated. "Those requests have to go through official channels." "I'm making the request now," Sarah replied. "And I want it documented that I made it. This was an unlawful detention. I was seized without probable cause, separated from my minor child, and held for nearly 4 hours." Voss nodded slowly, something like respect flickering behind her professional neutrality. "I'll note it," she said. The cuffs came off in the intake area. Sarah flexed her fingers as blood rushed back into them. The dull ache settling into something deeper. A supervisor appeared, a man with graying hair and a suit instead of tactical gear. He offered a tight smile. "We apologize for the inconvenience," he said. "Standard procedure in these operations." "Inconvenience," Sarah repeated quietly. "You traumatized my child and violated my civil rights. That's not procedure." The supervisor's smile disappeared. "You're free to file a complaint through proper channels," he said. "I will," Sarah replied, "and I'll be retaining counsel." She walked out of the facility into the fading daylight free, but changed, because being released wasn't the same as being vindicated. And the bill for what they'd done was only just beginning to come due. 3 weeks later, the lawsuit was filed, not quietly, not buried in paperwork. Filed in federal court with names attached and violations spelled out in black and white. The United States government. Agent Derek Carlson. Agents James Reeves and Linda Tran. The charges were precise. Unlawful detention. Racial profiling. Fourth Amendment violations. Infliction of emotional distress. Deprivation of civil rights under color of federal authority. This wasn't a story. It was a case. Sarah sat across from civil rights attorney Rachel Kowalski in a downtown Minneapolis conference room as footage from the drive-thru played on a loop. The moment her hands went behind her back, Elijah's face pressed to the window. Carlson's grip frozen in perfect clarity. "This is textbook," Rachel said quietly. "No probable cause. No reasonable suspicion. Multiple cameras. A minor present. They're exposed." The government moved fast. 6 weeks after filing. The first offer arrived $50,000. Dismissal with prejudice. And a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Rachel slid the paper across the table. "They want this gone." Sarah didn't touch it. "Settlements come with silence," she said. "Silence protects the system." The second offer came 3 months later. After discovery began and the depth of the evidence became undeniable. $200,000. Same terms. Rachel laid out the risks. Federal trials were expensive, unpredictable. Juries could be fickle. Sarah listened, then shook her head. What's the price of watching your mother get handcuffed at 10 years old, she asked. What's the market value of being treated like a criminal in your own neighborhood because of your skin? Rachel studied her for a long moment. Then we go to trial, she said. And just like that, what ICE had dismissed as an inconvenience became a reckoning they could no longer control. Because this wasn't about money. It was about forcing the truth into the open under oath. On the record. Where it could never be ignored again. The trial began on a cold February morning in Minneapolis. The courthouse was packed. Off-duty officers in dress uniforms filled the gallery. Community members sat shoulder to shoulder with civil rights advocates. Cameras lined the back wall. Waiting. Sarah walked in wearing her Minnesota Police Department dress blues. Service medals pinned neatly to her chest. 15 years of law enforcement etched into her posture. Calm. Controlled. Unflinching. The prosecution's case unfolded methodically. Body camera footage from all three agents played in sync with cell phone videos from bystanders. Different angles. Same truth. Sarah identifying herself. Offering verification. Remaining calm. Being ignored. The jury watched Elijah's face crumple as his mother was handcuffed. Watched her hands stay visible. Watched the agents escalate without cause. Then Sarah took the stand. She spoke for 2 days. About her career. Her commendations. The communities she'd served. About standing in that drive-thru. Trying to keep her voice steady so her son wouldn't panic while federal agents treated her like prey. On the second day, Rachel asked the question that shifted the room. Lieutenant Benson, how did you know during the detention that your constitutional rights were being violated? Sarah looked directly at the jury. Because I have a law degree, she said. From the University of Texas School of Law. I earned it while serving with Minnesota PD. I passed the bar 3 years ago. The courtroom went silent. I used that knowledge to document every violation in real time. Sarah continued. No probable cause. No reasonable suspicion. Prolonged detention. Excessive force. All clearly established law. The defense never recovered. They spoke of procedures, of vague intelligence, of justified caution, but they produced no reports, no threats, no explanation for why a police lieutenant with valid ID constituted an immigration risk. Cross-examination dismantled them piece by piece. What remained was undeniable. This wasn't a mistake. It was a violation. And the jury could see it clearly. The jury deliberated for 6 days. 6 days of replaying footage. Of revisiting testimony. Of weighing not just what happened to Sarah Benson but what it represented. When they returned, the courtroom rose. The foreperson's voice was steady. Clear. Impossible to misinterpret. We find in favor of the plaintiff. The damages phase followed immediately. Experts testified about trauma, about hypervigilance, about a 10-year-old boy who now flinched at the sight of police lights, about a career spent serving a system that failed its own. When the final number was read, a hush fell over the room. $16.7 million. Compensatory. Punitive. Public. Sarah didn't react. She sat still. Hands folded in her lap. Eyes closed, not in relief. Not in triumph. But in resolution, because it had never been about the money. It was about precedent. In the months that followed, Agents Carlson, Reeves, and Tran were suspended pending investigation. ICE announced policy reviews and revised procedures. Carefully worded statements that avoided admitting fault but changed behavior all the same. Sarah retired from Minnesota PD 6 months later. She took her pension, her medals, and walked away from the badge. But not from the fight. She opened a legal aid clinic focused on immigration detention and civil rights violations, funded scholarships for kids on Elijah's basketball team, built systems of protection where she'd once been denied them. Sarah Benson became something ICE never anticipated. Not just a plaintiff, a safeguard. Years later, when asked if she would relive that day if it meant the same outcome, she answered without hesitation, "I wouldn't choose the trauma," she said, "but I'd choose the fight every time." Because power underestimated is still power. And when documented, when challenged, it becomes accountability. If this story mattered to you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who understands why stories like this need to be told. Because tomorrow, there's another story of authority crossing the wrong line.